if you could change anything about the U.S. political system that's not like a partisan thing, like, oh, I'm a conservative, I want a conservative thing to happen, but just change one neutral thing about the system, what would it be?
We explained, because it was like, we were talking about how it feels like this is the never-ending election, even though we are actually close to the end of the election. And it just feels like it started forever. And then we know that whatever the next cycle is, it's going to start like probably halfway through election night. So we were joking before about how the British have this system where, you know, you're only legally allowed to campaign, like, I forget what it is, 3 or 4 weeks prior to the general election.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it would be kind of nice if we could have that. I mean, obviously it would run up against the First Amendment, but kind of nice if you just like get away from politics for 2 seconds. But no, we can't do that. So yeah, the question is, and Blake, that's what you were saying. You would want to change the primary date, I think.
Yeah, I think I would just make it so like you have like you said, maybe you have 2 or 3 weeks of official campaigning for a primary. You have your official primary day, maybe like last week of September, first week of October. Then you have your month election period, and then bam, you're done. It's over, and you can't start campaigning again until pretty close to the next election.
But then isn't that just well, how do you reconcile that with free speech, though?
So I think what you can do is you can still shorten the actual campaign period. Like you could make it so you don't actually announce your like you just make it so campaigns are not official until shortly before the election.
Sure, but you can still advocate.
You could still advocate. You could do it, but you could make it so like all the spending and donation is way more efficient only during this narrow window.
Then how do you regulate outside groups to spend money in June?
Well, you probably couldn't as easily. Like
So
there
it
are
still would be
obvious
a never-
I'm saying this is a change I would make. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's
We're
legal
just
to make
saying,
it or
like, if
easy.
you were, you know, like
No, I'm
wave
all
a magic
for it.
wand, it could change something.
I'm trying to.
yeah.
I'm-
So you think there should be a national primary date?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea.
You want
like,
a big government and nationalized primary date instead of like a states' rights?
I don't know that
decided
it's
primary
a super important part of states' rights.
we're
that
just
like
saying.
date. You don't think it's important that states get to decide? Here in Arizona,
just-
our snowbirds don't come back until
you know, as
September.
entertaining as it is, and I guess as lucrative as it is for us as people who cover politics, I don't think it's like
It's
super
actually
amazing
amazingly good for
that it
business.
takes like 8 months just the primary process, and we have all this maneuvering where like Iowa matters a ton, and then New Hampshire, and then like
well,
Tyler,
to your
What I
point.
talk about all day long.
Wait, I if there was one thing I would change, it would be the first in the nation primaries. And so I know there's a lot of people who are like, that's the holy of holies, you can't touch
how
it.
dare you?
Oh no, in the RNC too, they're like, you can't touch Iowa or New Hampshire. They
you know
love this.
why we would do this, by the way? It's because of the corn god. We are in thrall to the corn god who commands that we prostrate ourselves before him in the state of Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, I think
children, the corn.
there should be like a lottery. And we should, and this would make it be like a big thing. Like everybody, it would be like a big national thing, big lottery thing. And like, we're all talking
only
about
if Trump
it.
could run it.
We could do it like the NBA lottery. Like if your state is like doing really bad, like economically, you would get more balls in the hopper
I love
for
that.
getting the first primary.
That's great. That's great. If you're like the worst, you get more balls. Right?
So let the one. I think that it's time, and it's still law, to go back to taxpayer-funded presidential elections.
Yeah, I think. I mean,
we
that's how
did
you
it before
could do
Obama.
it.
No, I mean it's
Yeah.
already law. By the way, it's not a new law. It's just that every year the candidates reject the money.
Yeah.
I think what you need to do is make the money so hard. Like say that you get $2 billion, and then
That's it.
That's it. But you can't. By the way, just so we're clear, that means there's no fundraisers.
Yeah.
No
And,
fundraisers.
and then you
yeah.
have to figure. And I say this as someone who runs an outside group, a PAC and a C4 with Tyler. You got to figure a way to rein in the outside groups. The Citizens United case was legitimately the right decision, like constitutionally. It's bad for our country. I'm sorry.
It is bad. We are in permanent politics,
I am with the Young Turks on this one.
Totally agree.
It is bad. It is bad.
I totally agree.
Right?
I totally agree.
To be clear, the specific case they wanted to like censor a documentary attacking
A book,
Hillary.
actually.
Yeah, book. Yeah, and
no,
like,
that's why
that
it
was
the
an
right
insane claim.
But just so we're clear, it was one of those things where it was the right constitutional decision that was bad for the country.
It's the right decision, but here's the point. Nobody saw what the left was going to do after that, which was like basically weaponize all these C3s and C4s.
Exactly. With no regulation.
And we're just barely figuring this out, like as a nation.
It's so bad. It basically what it has done is it's gamified politics of whoever has the more complex, sophisticated infrastructure gets political power, not who has better ideas or a better track record.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's bad. I don't think that's actually healthy.
This is
you know why this is bad? Can I just say this real
go for
quick?
it.
You know why I think it's bad? The entire concept of America is built on the individual. So anything that takes away from the individual, whether that's, again, the same argument the left makes against corporations, this is the same thing as corporations acting as C3s and C4s. Sorry, go ahead.
So this would be another controversial kind of secular, nonpartisan change, but maybe a little more dangerous and definitely not good for us right now. But I do kind of wonder if, like, would it be good if we had a very long but in existence like term limit on Supreme Court justices? So it would work this way.
You need term limits first on Congress before you go Supreme Court.
So
that's what I always say. Look in the mirror first.
For sure. Well,
okay?
So the thinking here is what I'm thinking is it's clearly like one thing that's clearly driving the left insane and why they're going to like nuke the filibuster and do all this radical stuff is because they see the Supreme Court as this like huge obstacle. So what if you did it? This is a system. Actually, I think Steve Saylor proposed this, where basically you still have the 9 justices, and what it is when you get picked, you get an 18-year term.
Why should I?
And so a full 18-year term, and if you die or retire, you can be replaced, but that replacement can only serve out your term.
I have a question.
And then what this does, just to finish it out, what this would do is it means every president would get 2 picks. It would take 3 consecutive terms in a row to get a majority on the Supreme Court. And you wouldn't get this thing where, like, you know, it's not as tempting to like pack the court, and it would diminish somewhat this thing where they've realized having them on the court for life is such an advantage. So we're picking like 40-year-olds to serve on the Supreme Court now because they're like, oh, they'll be there for 50 years. And it's clearly like both parties are starting to realize the extreme elements latent in the Supreme Court. And I do worry it's going to eventually like cause one of them to have a psychotic break and blow up the system.
It's because post-Bork, the Supreme Court has become politicized.
It is much more political.
Prior Bork, it was not. Bork was the Rubicon.
Yeah. And
Bork, then Thomas.
And it made sense, too, that like we needed it to be more political because what we were doing is we just had like Eisenhower going and picking Earl Warren, and then Earl Warren is going and being like, yeah, I'm just going to remake the entire constitutional order.
Yeah, and then Berger did the same thing.
Yeah, and Berger was a lot better. The Berger court was a big improvement.
He sucked.
Well,
personally, his court was an improvement over Warren's. That'll get clipped because they'll be like, oh, Warren did the... Just stop it.
Warren was really bad.
Yeah, Warren, like, I mean, that's why we get all these, insane pro-crime decisions, and then we had a giant crime surge. That's where you get the Supreme Court saying, actually, all those laws that ban racial discrimination actually require racial discrimination. And, you have the right to abortion. Like, all this insane stuff comes out of the judicial ideology they had. Anyway, that's very much downstream. Jack had a fun rule he wanted to change in the U.S. political system.
Well, I want to ask you this question before you get to Jack's. Real quick. Would you trade term limits for Congress for Supreme Court?
As in, take Congress term limits instead?
So Charlie said that we need. Would you want Supreme Court term limits if we could get congressional term limits?
I don't know that term limits in Congress are overall as useful. I don't know what you'd be fixing with that necessarily. I worry that if you had term limits in Congress, it would make Congress even more kind of controlled by like lobbyists and DC lifers, because there would be no one with like the level of experience in Congress to counteract them. They would just kind of do what people advise them to.
That was the intention of Congress to begin with. But
I mean, California has term limits, and is California like
we have term limits here in Arizona?
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not sold on that. One crazy idea I had was if you made it so once you like serve in Congress or in a senior executive position, you can literally never earn more money
ever
than you make while a member of government. So there's not as much incentive to cash out. It's like, it's a public service thing. You maybe go into it after your career is done.
That won't hold up in court, though, unfortunately.
You can't restrict people's become income. A lobbyist.
I bet you could.
Give me one example of where you've been able to say you can't earn a certain amount of money.
Well, you could earn a certain amount of money, but you could radically increase their tax rate, or you could increase like
you just take their money.
Yeah.
Or you just say this.
I am in favor of taking the money of people who are in the government.
I know a lot of this stuff will get struck down.
You can just outlaw somebody.
But we're kind of wildly speculating here.